And in 1995, I was in a psychiatric institution with major anxiety disorder, panic disorder, PTSD, and depression. So welcome to the conference. I'm so happy you're here.
And so I don't mean to be flip, I really don't, but it's my story and I'm not ashamed, I'm not embarrassed. It's why I'm here with you today.
I am Tammy West, and that is my story. Welcome to Consider Yourself Hugged, a place to find comfort and support as you navigate your mental and emotional well-being. So sit back and relax, unless you're driving, and get ready for this week's hug. Hello, welcome back, my beautiful fellow hug seekers. Let's go ahead and get the elephant in the room out of the way. If you're not watching on YouTube, you don't know what I'm talking about. But if you're watching on YouTube, you see this big scab on my nose. I just took a screenshot thinking I would post it in the show notes. And then I thought, does anybody really care if they see the big scab on my nose? Like I'm telling you, I have a big scab on my nose. So here's the story. I also don't know why I'm waving a highlighter at you. All right, calm. It's been a day of not a bad day, not even really a challenging day, just a weird day. You know what I mean? So this is like my favorite thing to do, record this podcast. So when I usually have times when I record, but sometimes I'm like, I just need to record. So here I am, breathing, recording. Let's see. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, there's Charlie. Charlie. All right, enough of that. Let's come back to the story and the point of the story. Wednesday was another, it was actually a wonderful but strange day. So I had two events on Wednesday. I had one in Nashville. So you all might remember I'm in White House, which is just north of Nashville. So my first event was in Nashville at the Hilton, and it was the National Association of State and Provincial Lottery. I think I'm saying that right. Anyway, it was new leaders. It was their new leader conference. And I was speaking about emotional intelligence. And so I knew that it was going to be a little tight. They rearranged their time for me so that I could be there from 9 to 10. And then I had to come back to White House to do a women's stress event from 11:30 to 1:30. So I get in my car Wednesday morning, and it took me an hour and a half to go 25 miles from here to Nashville, which thank goodness I allotted enough time. The event was amazing. Then I knew I needed to, not rush, not speed, but be expedient to get back to White House to make sure I was there to get all the last minute things done before 11:30. So I did that. I went home, got my husband, and he dropped me off because he needed to take the SUV. He dropped me off. He's talking on the phone. I get out of the car. I gather all my things. I shut the door. I turn, and I fall and faceplant right into the parking lot asphalt. And I was so mad because you might remember that just in January, I fell over Charlie, busted my head open, had to go to the emergency room, get stitches, have a CT, I had a concussion, all that stuff. And then I probably didn't even tell you that in between then and now, I tripped over Charlie again. It's just like constant. And so I'm lying there in the parking lot, and I'm crying, like sobbing, not because I was hurt, although I was hurt. I had the scab here. I had two on the side of my nose. My knees were swollen and bruised and all these things. But the reason I was crying is because I was so mad. And I was like, why does this keep happening to me? And my kids were worried. They're like, Mom, you should get this checked out. But my husband really, he puts it in perspective. And I talked about this when I tripped over Charlie, like, it's time to slow down. The problem is, I don't think that I'm not being careful. Like, I don't think that I'm not slowing down. So I don't really know. I know that it's not like a physical thing. Like I don't just stand there and fall. I think it's all related to just, my husband said you had a box in one hand, you had your purse strapped over you, and you were pulling your roller bag. And well, that's true. But then if I'm going to carry all those things at once, I do need to remind myself to slow down and pay attention. But here's where it comes into our talk today. Today is Stress Awareness Month, Part 4. So this is our last week on stress awareness. And today we're ending with women and relationships. So if you don't know, if you haven't been listening to the last few episodes, I decided to focus on women because the research still shows that women are more affected by this concept of air quotes stress than men. And today is about relationships. And as I was lying there in the parking lot and my husband was trying to help me up, I wasn't ready to get up. I first of all, I couldn't figure out. I still had my purse over me. My roller bag was in between my legs. It was just, well, it was crazy. Well, I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes in maybe, out comes Mandy and Shelby, the 2 women who basically, well, Mandy is the CEO and Shelby runs as well, the White House Area Chamber of Commerce. That's where I was doing the event. And they came out and they were very, like, purposeful, and they came over and they said, "Hi," and I still hadn't gotten up yet. They said, "We wanted to give you a minute, we knew Tim was with you, and sometimes people don't wanna be helped, and sometimes they do, so we waited," and I was so appreciative, and so they helped me up, and they Mandy, like, put her arm all the way around me. I wrote them this morning to see if it was captured on the Ring camera, but I'll post a little bit of it that was, but it was mainly when we were coming in the door. But she put her arm around me and just walked with me all the way to the door. She let me cry. She did not let go. And she was there with me the whole time. She and Shelby brought me inside. They got me a chair. And it was just, I thought, I can translate this into so many messages, but that is an example of an empowering relationship in my life, a supportive relationship, a compassionate relationship. So this last part, and as I have before, I have like 2 printouts. I have my stress club book, I have my coffee, I have my notes on my computer because I wanted to do the same format as we've done before, which was just kind of open, well, with whatever dumb story I have, and then talk a little bit more about that APA Stress in America report, do a deep dive, talk about where I feel like I've succeeded and where I've made mistakes, and then finally, just a few tips. So that's what we're going to do today. So, as I was looking at the APA report, I just want to remind you what it said about women in relationships. So, it said women were more likely than men to cite relationships as key stressors in their lives. 49% of women versus 44% of men. And what's more, this is what really struck me. Women were more likely than men to say they strongly agree that no one understands how stressed they are, and were less likely to report that they can quickly get over stress. And I was thinking, because you might remember week 2, that one of the top thing that women cited as being stressors to them was family responsibilities. And I was thinking, well, what's the difference between family responsibilities and relationships? So then I looked at the questions that they asked, and I hope I don't remember if I posted the questions for you. I think that I did, and I'll refer you to that in the show notes. One of the questions they asked was, what causes you stress? And so relationships was on there and family responsibilities was on there. So that didn't really help, right? Because it was just, this is what women said. And then another question they asked, they said, how many people can you talk to about what's happening in your life? For example, stress, relationships, etc. And that's really the only, I did a keyword search on the APA report and on the questions for the word relationship. And that's really the only 2 that came up. So then I started looking at the research and I found a couple of things. Now, I don't even know. Like, it's when you look up women in relationships, a lot of it does revolve around either just romantic relationships or relationships being like family responsibilities. And I just wanted relationships. But ladies, this was interesting. And I'll put this in the show note. in the show notes. The article is called Stress is, well, it's a research article. Stress is higher for women in long-term relationships. And when I put women stress relationships, this article came up like 5 times. So it's pretty technical, but their evidence suggests that in a heterosexual relationship, the female partner's well-being is more influenced by her male's partners than vice versa. And so women, it said perhaps because women are traditionally socialized to pay more attention to interpersonal relationships. So basically they were saying that in long-term relationships, women are more stressed than men. The second thing that I wanted to read to you was just my book, The Stress Club. So you might remember that I interviewed women about the topic of stress. And on my chapter about just women and how we experience life, I just wanted to read 3. Now, these are just extracts. This is part of a study, but I'm not saying that this translates to all women. Like, I didn't do a specific study about women and relationships, but here's what some of the women said. Kay, and these are fake names, Kay says, "Oh, yeah, I'm telling you, my mother in law once told me, she said, being a woman's never fair. It's not right, but that's the way God made it, and that's just the way it is." So when it comes to relationships or whatever, it's just the way God made us. Jacqueline, fake name, said, and I asked the question, do you think it's worse for women than men? And she says, I mean, it's not like they don't carry some of the same amount of stress that we do, but we just take it more to heart, I think, than they do. And then the last thing I wanted to read was from Erica. And I actually pulled out part of her extract from multiple parts in the book, but this one's a little bit longer, a few sentences. Erica says, I think, and we kind of talked about this before you got here, when my girlfriends and I get together, we all absolutely talk openly about the stresses of day-to-day life. And I do think it is pretty much the norm. I was trying to think when you said that when the last time I felt like I wasn't stressed out, and I really don't know when that was. But I will say my husband, on the other hand, he doesn't seem to be stressed ever. And his job is, I mean, to me, from the outside looking in, looks very stressful to me. But he just takes it in a different way. I feel like women almost harbor it. And I don't know, she goes on. And so when I think about this concept of women in relationships, it's huge. And so I wrote a few things down. So what's different? And this is just coming from me. I'm not finding a study that, in fact, even in the APA report, like what's the difference between family responsibilities and relationships? And so this is what I wrote down. Family responsibility, we would think of things like housework, childcare, shopping, cooking, maintenance, tasks, all of those things. But then I'm making inferences here about just relationships. Relationships might be about things like communication, conflict, worry, money, blended families, relationships, not about caring for the family and the responsibilities there. Oh, and I left off family responsibility could be caring for an aging parent. That's the responsibility. But do you see where the relationship part could still be about communication or conflict when you're taking care of an aging parent? Does that make sense? I don't know. I hope it does make sense. So then I was thinking as I take a drink, this is actually, I don't know if some of you remember my Consider Yourself Hugged mug. Again, I know you can't see it if you're just listening, but I have in it chocolate or coffee spiked with hot chocolate. You wonder what I was going to say. It's still a cool day here in Middle Tennessee, so I'm going to use as much hot chocolate time as I can get. What are my successes when it comes to relationships? Actually, let me back up. So I was thinking my relationships would be with my children, my husband, my friends, people I work with, my clients, my in-laws, other family members, grandkids. Those are all my relationships, right? So I put what have I done well over the years? I put therapy, apologizing, learning language tools like scripting and power phrases, which I've talked to you about before, allowing my grown children to be grown. I'm thinking of others while I'm talking, but I think that's good enough. Those are the ones that came to me when I was writing my notes for this earlier. What are things I didn't do well? Mistakes I think I made. Excessive anger, which just grew and grew and grew. Unrealistic expectations all the time, which led to what we would call passive aggressive behavior. That was me for a good chunk of my life. Focusing too much on my needs. Now, isn't that interesting? Because we tend to think of women as always focusing on other people, and there's a lot of truth to that. But what I mean here is that it all goes together. I would be angry with people because I wasn't having my needs met, but I would never speak up about it. And then finally, incorrect assumptions. I would make assumptions about why other people were behaving the way they were behaving. So those are a few. I would love to know in the show notes if you want to like throw some ideas out there. What have you done well? What are some mistakes that you've made? I would love to hear all of it. All right, let's move on to so when it comes to like what are the tips? I think the things that I did well are some of my tips, right? And that's to learn effective communication. If you want to talk to me about scripting or using power phrases, if you want to get that book from me, please, 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 um, just let me know. Contact me. You have all my contact information in the show notes. Therapy. If you want to talk to me about that, mental health first aid, you all know I've talked about that a lot. That's helped with my relationships because it's allowed me to think more about when somebody might be having a mental health challenge. Um, Allowing your children who are grown to be grown, apologizing when necessary. Those are all tips. But then I was like, okay, in a 30-minute and under podcast, what can I even begin to throw out there to you about some quick tips? So these are quick tips, but I love to look at research-based things. I don't want to read an article from, bobshappy.com, although I'm tammywest.com, so who's to say? But this comes from the University of Nebraska, and it's actually their Department of Student Affairs, which is kind of awesome because these students are basically adults, but they're still so early in their adult relationship building. And then they have these tips. And I thought of all the things that I looked at, I didn't want to read you anything that was too scientific. And there were 6. I'm going to just read you the tip. I'll put it in the show notes. And then I did highlight a couple of things about the tip. But even though they're basic, they're so powerful. So here we go. Number 1, learn about yourself. You think when you're in a relationship, you need to learn about the other person. But so I'm going to read this. This is what I highlighted here. And I think this is so beautiful. Are you listening? I hope you're listening. Let me put myself back on camera so I know if the more you appreciate yourself, are in touch with your feelings, and learn to express emotions in a regulated, and I'm going to add mature way, the stronger the relationship with someone else can become. It's got to start with us. I couldn't have a healthy relationship until basically after the mental hospital stay, because that's when I began to turn my life around. I did not have healthy relationships until after that point. Number 2, give the relationship time and energy. I'm going to read almost all of this, but just a little paragraph. Healthy relationships are not something you simply find fully formed out in the world. Is that not like, I know it's simple, but we don't just go out and suddenly we're in a relationship and it's wonderful and fully formed. It doesn't happen that way. Willingness to learn about each other and a commitment to trying to understand each other's needs. Relationships are living things that require a continual investment of time, energy, and care to develop and flourish. And that is whether you are in a partnership, relationships, romantic relationship, you're a parent, you're a daughter, you're a friend, those relationships require time and commitment, and they also change. That's why I said about my kids, allowing them to actually be adults. Number 3, develop and I think when I put that in my list, yeah, I made the and all caps because it says develop and honor boundaries. Boundaries has become like this, I don't know, it's almost a word that people are like, oh, boundaries, boundaries. But I like the way they define this. Boundaries are the distance at which you can care for both yourself and another person simultaneously. They are necessary for relationships to proceed with respect and comfort. But remember, it's to develop them for yourself, but also honor them with other people. Somebody I know was sharing a story with me recently about a romantic relationship, and they shared with that person that it was a fairly new relationship, and they shared that they needed to have time alone still during the week. Like, as much as they love being with this person, they still needed their alone time. And that's really important to establish that. Number 4, talk and listen with respect. And it's practice listening. You might even talk to that person and say, listen, I don't know if I've always been the greatest listener, if I always understand what you're saying. So let's work on that together. So sometimes we listen in order to respond. And if you've taken any communication classes, you realize what I'm saying, that we're like sitting on the edge of our seats waiting for them to finish so that we can rebut what they're saying or respond. And that takes time to practice. Again, I'm not perfect in so many things that I do, but I think I've gotten better at that. And it takes what I mean is that waiting to tell them that what they're saying about me, if it's a conflict conversation, like waiting to rebut what they're saying about me. And because I've developed the language skills, then I can take a moment and take a breath. And instead of saying that is not true, to come back maybe with a question. Number 5, let go of what you can't control. Let me say this next sentence twice. You are in control of yourself only. You are in control of yourself only. So you can control, going back to the listening and the boundaries and the time and the energy and getting to know yourself, you are in control of yourself. So focus on yourself and what is in your power to manage. And the last thing, which is so beautiful, take time to reflect and grow. Do you see how that came back full circle? Like the first one was learn about yourself, and then we did all these other things, and then we came right back to take time to reflect and grow. So I'm going to read this part too, because I think it's very pretty. If you can recognize your deepest feelings and their origins, you will be able to communicate and connect better with other people. So ask yourself, which relationships in your life seem to be working the best? Can you pinpoint why? What good qualities of those relationships could you bring into other relationships in your life? So there we have it. The end of Stress Awareness Month. As much as I don't like the word, you all know I don't like the word, but I understand that it's still part of our society. So maybe we'll change it to Life Awareness Month, Life Challenges Awareness Month. But I'm so happy that you hung with me for this month. We're moving on to some different things next month. I have a couple of interviews that I'm going to post. So thank you for staying with me. Thank you for being part of our community. Again, if you don't know anything about mental health first aid and you're interested, I'll put a link in the show notes. I'm very passionate about helping other people connect with those who might be having a mental health challenge and then to be able to support them. So just being really a connector is what that is, being a bridge. If you are not following me on Facebook, please follow me on my professional page. If you're not part of our women's group, private Facebook group, please do that. Rate, review, download, share, all the things. And until we're together next time, consider yourself hugged.